in general, and maybe how we compare to what's going on here in Colorado. We had just a great discussion on the demographics of the state and how they're shifting, and I'm wondering if we can apply that to what we're seeing in the commercial real estate space. What makes the Springs so unique in this space, and maybe how we compare to the rest of the state overall?
Oh, goodness. Good afternoon. I'm going to also answer that, I guess, from a downtown perspective, because that's what I do, and that's the kind of the title of this panel. I think we have a unique opportunity in Colorado Springs that we are not Denver. We don't want to be Denver. Denver is Denver, but we're also not, a mountain ski town either. And we have this tremendous access to our outdoors, which is great. It's not unique for Colorado. There are other communities with great access to their outdoors, not necessarily Denver, but other smaller communities. And what we need to do to ensure that we can provide the economic opportunities, the lifestyle, whatever folks may crave, we need to be the both and. We have the great natural environment, and there are people and businesses that also want a great urban environment. And so we're on our way. We've got ways to go, but hopefully you're starting to see the progress downtown. There are some folks, as I always say, if you love the Pikes Peak region and you want to live on 2 acres in a 5,000 square foot home and a 3-car garage, we can offer that. But there are also people who want walkability and proximity to coffee shops and great amenities, and we need to offer that as well to be competitive for talent. And that's what would make Colorado Springs, and is starting to make Colorado Springs, stand out among all other Colorado communities, right? That you either could be maybe the ski town with the great access to the outdoors, but you're not urban and all the things that a city may offer, or you're Denver, but Denver's not near the mountains and as accessible as we are here. So we believe with downtown Colorado Springs, we have this opportunity that you can be in your Class A office space or your very cool apartment, and you just step right outside your door and can access the natural amenities, but you can also then, on your way back home, stop for a beer, right next door to your apartment and have that. And I think that's what's going to make Colorado Springs unlike any other city in Colorado.
Anyone else like to add to that before I prompt us elsewhere? It's all you. It's the Susan Show. I love it. All right, well, I know we've seen a lot of different headlines kind of making the news recently about high vacancy rates of office spaces. A lot of major cities are reporting these low vacancy rates, low occupancy. But prior to the pandemic, we seemed to be having a bit of an office space boom that was quickly shut down as a lot of us moved to remote work. Now a lot of our workforce is returning to the office. So I'm wondering if you can talk about what kind of trends we're seeing in Colorado Springs with people returning to work in the spaces that are available to them, and what our vacancy rates are looking like downtown.
So you probably see a lot of national headlines, right, about urban centers really all across the country that were more deeply impacted by the pandemic than other parts of the city. And certainly we had our challenges as well, but I would say don't adhere to those national headlines. Mid-sized cities like Colorado Springs and other mid-sized cities were really kind of the sweet spot in getting through these times. So absolutely have there been impacts in the downtown office market in this sort of new way of working, new way of being. Sure, we have absolutely seen changes, but luckily not nearly as dramatically as, again, to look up north, downtown Denver, sometimes they're at topping 30% vacancy in their office. We're currently, I was just pulling some recent numbers, we're getting close to about a 9% vacancy third quarter of this year. That's, again, ticking up a little bit from 2 years ago. We were a little over 5%. So it is ticking up. In fact, we've had 11 straight quarters of that vacancy rate going up. But I'll remind you that these numbers actually are not that different than what we saw kind of 2012, 2018 timeframe. So sure, we want to see things go the other direction, but this is not anything too terribly significant. We entered the pandemic with a really, really, really tight office market. And tight in really challenging ways, right? We don't yet have that kind of churn and that availability of product that if a great company of 300 or 400 employees wants to be downtown, you know, where are you going to put them? Now we're at least starting to have a little bit of a loosening up maybe for opportunities like that. But that really has been our challenge more. We've been sort of the opposite of some of the trends and not having the availability of space to attract new companies and new talent. The other thing I'll say too, when it comes to return to work trends, we do have ways that we measure that and ways that we can compare with cities across the country. Many cities use the same kind of software platform that literally can measure as people move about and returning to the office. And we have been really near the top of the pack in physically returning to the office space, which is also an encouraging sign. I think that goes to some of the employment sectors you see downtown. Government has mostly said get physically back in the office. Obviously, we have a lot of DoD contracted companies and folks like that where maybe for security reasons and other reasons they need to physically show up. So, but even things like hospitality, right? You don't do a hospitality job from remotely. I don't know any of you. Well, I guess more and more, right? We order food from a QR code or something, but there's usually a human involved in cooking it and serving it to you. So we've been very encouraged by the physical return of people to their spaces, because of course that's really important for us for small business. Those are then people that are going out to eat or doing other things related to that. So not ideal, but not panicky either. But I would add, and this might be then tossing it to Mr. Finn here, we need new office product too. We need the kind of office product people are looking for now. And it's been a long time since we've had new office product downtown.
Yeah, so gentlemen, maybe you can elaborate on that because I know that we're looking at the trends of the city, but also in comparison to the Denver market, right? And how are our occupancy and vacancy rates comparing to those spaces? I mean, you talk about maybe how we are positioned so well and why you see that to be the case.
Well, I'll jump in, but I think one of the two keys to success to why we're, 10%-ish market-wide on the office vacancy rates, one is we did not overbuild. So back in 14, 15, 17, right after we got out of the 2007 kind of recession, you go up to Denver and you'd see all these cranes and new towers being built up, and it's like, wow, we're FOMO, right? What are we doing in Colorado Springs? Where are all the cranes? What's going on? And I think because of that now we're reaping the benefits because we did not bring new office product to market. The latest tower that's been built as a spec project is probably 2008, Epic One up in Interquest. And the problem with, like Denver, it's expensive to bring that product to market. And so you kind of had the meeting of all the bad stuff coming together, softening in demand. That new product needs to command absolute top of the market rates because it's so expensive to buy that land, develop it, vertical construction, and lo and behold, those developers are not penciling in 4% returns on their money. It's incredibly risky to do that kind of work. And it's from the time you plan it to the time you'll actually have product come into market, it's a 4 or 5 year time frame. And people tell you all the time in real estate, it's location, location, location. Well, I would tell you that timing is probably more important than location. So because we didn't have that glut, I think right now we're in a pretty good spot. I'll leave it to Jeff to answer the question about the new product coming to the market because the rents that you have to get are kind of up there. But the other piece is that we have industries in Colorado Springs that have really withstood COVID pretty well. DoD, we kept U.S. Space Command stayed here, Space Force, IT, healthcare has been doing well. So we haven't had industries that have just fled Colorado Springs. I mean, I think the call center type uses are leaving Colorado as a whole. But by and large, demand has stayed pretty steady. So as much as we missed out in late teens, I think we're reaping the benefits now because of it. So.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay? I will add, we didn't overbuild, we just didn't build.
No, zero.
Yeah.
And our supply continued to age, and age pretty poorly. We hear from the broker community when an out of town user comes in, they say, "Can you please show me your Class A market office product?" And we show them, what we show them, and they say, "No, really, where's your Class A office product?" And so, I think, maybe yes, it's definitely positive, but we also haven't believed in our office market in quite some time in our urban core. If you go look at even when these towers that are in downtown, including the ones we own at Plaza the Rockies and Alamo Corporate Center, you're talking about big boom in the 80s. That space is, by and large, kind of the same format that it used to be. Well, workers and their demands have changed considerably. Building systems have changed. Technology has changed. And so we see a great opportunity, and maybe some of we have proposed a new 200,000 square foot office tower at the corner of Saguache and Cimarron. I'd love it to be a 600,000 square foot building, but you don't start with 600,000 square foot building because that's a lot of zeros. And so so I think we can prove, it's not quite a if you build it they will come mentality when you're talking about a $104 million project, but it is something that we fully believe that the downtown of the future will have new Class A office that meets current and future demands, as we kind of heard from our previous session.
I think when I think about my experience living here over the last 15 years, and many of you maybe have seen this as well, the way that we live, work, and play downtown is really exciting. The changes coming to downtown in the area are really exciting. So Jeff, maybe what is it that you see from a demand side, and what kind of companies are you seeing that are really demanding this space that you're looking to build and hoping in that tower to fill rather quickly, I would assume?
Yeah. I would say the sectors that we are seeing demand is in the financial services, technology, and the DoD kind of, and again, those are actually very different sectors to serve. If you know anything about the DoD, they have these things called SCIFs, which are really great to put in buildings that don't need windows, and so you just you get like I think we will also try and pair where do the workers live, and how are the employee base of these companies actually following them. And so I think that's a key element too, because, and I'm not going to tell you the company's name, but you guys probably all they touch your phone somehow. They have 600 workers here in our community, and they do not have a square foot of office space. They would love to have an office in our downtown, and it's actually not coming from the mothership that isn't here. It's coming from the workers themselves that say, "Hey, we all work from home, and we want we actually want a place where we can gather and connect." And so I don't know. I see a lot. I mean, we are definitely optimists in this realm, and so definitely see the potential.
Also, if I look to the future a little bit, I guess the demand that's going to drive new office product, which is sorely needed, no doubt about it, is going to have to come from out of town, because the rents needed to justify new product. I mean, for those of you who follow commercial real estate, I mean, we probably have to be talking about $40 triple net to be able to make those numbers work. Well, right now you can go rent space at Plaza of the Rockies, which is probably one of the nicer office buildings we have downtown, at about $20-ish triple net. So you're talking about the rents doubling from what current office users are paying downtown to justify new construction. Well, most of those office users are not going to say, "Yeah, double my rent and I'll get some newer, nicer," because Plaza of the Rockies is actually a pretty nice space. But we think somebody coming from outside of the market, probably from the coast or the big cities, that are, for them, $40 triple net, they've been paying that for 20 years. They're like, this is cheap. Sign us up. Where do I sign? Our current users here locally, making that jump is just too big. So I think what's going to need to happen is a big draw of tech, DOD, whatever, from someplace else outside the market to kind of drive that demand.
And I know you want to probably go to the next question, but one thing to add is that I look at a lot of other cities. I study a lot of other cities, and a lot of times we tend to believe our own BS and get stuck. Cherry Creek went through this. Downtown Denver went through this. Rhino is actually doing this right now with new office. The tech center in Denver, it did this. There was a moment where it was all here, it needed to go here, and someone took the leap, and then it happened. So, just also put it into perspective, it actually can happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. Susan, maybe you can talk about what you see from the demand driver side as far as like local businesses trying to stay in Colorado Springs, and the kinds of options that we have available to them now, as we're obviously trying to create more space for companies to come in the future, like space and availability now and affordability now downtown. What does that look like, and what are you guys trying to accomplish?
And are you talking more like office users or more?
Let's talk about office
commercial
users first, then we'll switch. Yeah.
I think Alex really kind of hit on that piece in particular. I guess I'd add maybe from a different perspective of workers. I'm going to actually talk about co-working for a minute. We're definitely seeing changes in like who's in the co-working spaces. I talked to a handful of folks running co-working, and they say, over half, this kind of also speaks to what you're saying about it needs to be someone from out of town for the big office user, but even for those individuals, over half the inquiries they're getting in co-working are from people new to the community, right? They're making the lifestyle choice to move here, and they are remote workers. And even then, the users or the members of these co-working spaces used to be skewed more pre-pandemic-ish, where you're sort of solopreneurs, small entrepreneur, maybe 2 or 3 people in a new startup using that co-working space. And now what you're seeing much more in co-working are remote workers. So they may be an employee of a very, very large, well-known tech company, because we absolutely, you name all the usual tech suspects, we have people in Colorado Springs working for those companies because these people are choosing to live here. So I would just sort of add, from the small office user perspective, that who's using it is changing, and it is, more like a drill down microcosm of it. The big office user or the individual office user also showing that it's those out-of-towners that, one, they're probably used to an urban environment. Certainly, as you say, with price point of an office user, they don't blink at the higher rates, and that bears true down to like just individuals as well.
Yeah. Really quickly, I'm going to throw it out to the audience and just also mention that if you have questions as you're sitting there and listening, you have a QR code on the screen that will take you to your digital presentation, and then on this particular downtown and commercial real estate page, you'll have a QR code where you can submit questions, so I can take questions to our panelists at the end. So now's a great time to be thinking of what those might be and get those into me so I can prompt them here in a few minutes. So the other thing that I think we haven't really touched on, since we've been talking about office space so much, is even our real estate, and coming back to like, what do we do when we go downtown, those of us who are here and don't just work downtown, but we also enjoy going downtown and experiencing our hospitality and our retail markets. So can we talk a little bit about potentially growth of or lack of growth in the retail spaces in downtown and what we're seeing in that regard?
I could start. Obviously, downtown, we have such a variety of spaces. We have really quite old and scrappy, that sometimes there's exactly what you want because it gives you that very cool vibe. We're starting to have new construction commercial spaces. be that in some mixed-use developments, or think about the new Widener apartment homes by Widener Field, street-level commercial that they've integrated into that new multifamily property. So when we talk about rates, it can be all over the map because, again, it could be a very somewhat dilapidated, funky, really kind of cool, older space that probably does still need a little attention to it, into like more new construction stuff. So that means our leasing rates have been all over the map. We have seen a huge surge in asking rents downtown. It was up to 50% change in asking rents in 1 year. And I am concerned. I want property owners to reap the value of their property with their tenants. But this kind of goes back to the hype. We got a lot of good things going on downtown. And more to come as we have more residents and such. But the small businesses are really struggling. Our vacancy rates are a little bit up. Didn't happen immediately after the pandemic, but over time as leases come up and some folks don't renew. So our street level retail vacancy is sitting at about 9% now, which again is not concerning, but we need the right kind of product, right? We have really interesting spaces downtown, particularly the older buildings. They're like big giant shoe boxes, right? So you get a little bit of street level presence and then it goes way back. Well, not every retailer can whether you're food and beverage or like soft goods retail, not everyone can fill spaces that large. So how we learn to subdivide and retrofit those spaces to better accommodate different kinds of uses. And I will personally say where I'm particularly concerned is downtown has held up through the years, partly because, well, certainly because independently owned, which it offers a great unique experience, but we actually do have shopping downtown, which a lot of downtowns don't have anymore, and that's so important for daytime activation. But soft goods retail just can't turn the numbers as much as food and beverage, so I do worry about I get changes in lifestyle. Everybody wants to go out for a bite to eat or drink or something, but we've got to have that mix, which means somewhat accepting different lease rates for the soft goods retail versus the food and beverage, because not every single place can be the hot new food and beverage place, and we need that symbiotic relationship between the two to survive. In a big city with tall buildings, you can make that street level rent lower because you have all that office space above to make it up, right? And so you really want that coffee shop in there, even though that coffee shop is not the giant moneymaker, but it's a great amenity for your tenants. But in the core of downtown, we have a lot of old historic buildings, and it's 1 or 2 stories. So property owners need to command a certain amount of rent for that. So it's a really complicated time right now, I'd say. Plus, we just have more competition. A lot more has opened up. And it's going to take more residents and more demand to really kind of meet those new restaurants and offerings.
Yeah.
But to piggyback on that too, I mean, you can see downtown in the mix of retailers that we have, and you have a lot of institutions that have been in town for KOAA, Richards, I mean, go down the list, and yet rents have gone up, but you compare that to, for example, if you go up to Interquest, right, you go to Shields or Torchy's or well, once you get up there and it's brand new retail, and same thing, the cost of development and the cost of vertical construction is not going down, those landlords and those landowners have to get a certain level of rents. Well, the mom and pop type shops, you'll call them, can't swing those rents. Yeah. And so when you go up there, what do you have? You have the big national retailers, and we have some of them downtown, but that's what makes downtown cool a little bit, is you have a lot more of a mishmash of this local flavored stuff, and those building owners typically have owned that stuff for a long time. Their basis in those buildings is not the same as when you build it brand new up in Interquest, and you can afford to, I mean, every tenant is telling you their rent is too expensive.
Of course.
But especially if you're going to fix up the old place and make it look cool, and you have that character and that vibe, and let's expose the brick and the hardwood floors, and well, it's not cheap to do, and so the rents are creeping up, but it's nothing compared to brand new retail where all of a sudden you're at $40 triple net and you're just pricing out all the small guys. So you get a much different experience. So hopefully downtown will stay what it is, because I think that's why people from outside of downtown come in and
Absolutely.
do what they do.
Well, and I'll just add one last thing to what you said, Alex, too. Like, part of our strength has been these kind of anchor businesses that have been there a long time, like a Poor Richards and a Rutledge's and a Terra Verde and Sparrowhawk. part of their strength is they own their property. And so they've been these wonderful anchors, and I want new generations to be able to own their property, because that creates the kind of stability that even in tough times, they can muddle through a few bad years because they're building equity in their property. And previous generations had some of that opportunity, and that's obviously getting harder now.
Well, I kind of want to come to Jeff next if we can. I feel like as we kind of ease out of this conversation, you know a lot about what's going on in the city and the cool new projects on the horizon that are maybe even 10 years out, 20 years out, and we're thinking long term about some really exciting opportunities in downtown. But I also know that we have a lot of local residential realtors here. So maybe if you could tell us what is exciting about for you downtown, and also how that would apply to folks that are out there really servicing the community and the residential space as well, trying to bring people into the city and get them housed.
Yeah, you know, I tend to look at things in decades, not years or months or days. And so if you look at of what downtown was in the 90s and in the early 2000s when I showed up on the scene, Chinook's bookstore was rocking. Chipotle maybe was just opening, I think. It was one of the first in certainly in Colorado and the world. Tejon Street was one way.
Let's not talk about that.
And so you think about these things, and you think about how we as cities like continue to kind of step up to, not only meet the needs of residents, but that's what's so great about downtown is that downtown was actually the original city. It was, the original, like, meets and bounds. Like, you arrived on Palmer's train, got off on his train station, walked through his hotel, and then you entered into the backside through the front of the city. And so looking forward, what's next? I mean, there was a time when we said, darn, I really wish we had more residential downtown, because we didn't have any. Prior to Blue Dot Place and Eco, the first purpose-built urban apartment project was built in 1968, and it was called Boulder Crescent. And so, we have like this decade really has been about bringing residents downtown and neighbors downtown and making it a neighborhood. Now we will have how many residents in downtown?
Well, we're opening 2,000 units this year and next. So you put a little multiplier on that, that's closer to 3,000 or a little under 3,000 people.
So 3,000 people, that's in the scheme of neighborhoods across the community, that's actually not large. But we actually must continue to deliver on that and continue to provide additional housing resources, more cranes for housing. So you'll hear me say that. We also have some really, really great initiatives that we can build on the momentum. And so you think about City for Champions. 3 of the City for Champions assets are downtown in the Widener Field, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum, and Robeson Arena. And those were awesome. What is next? And how do we continue to deliver? Palmer High School, there's been a lot of kind of press around Palmer. Palmer is going to be the best high school in the country. I'm just going to put that out there. Like, the best downtown deserves the best downtown high school. The why needs to get figured out. They have continued to have a vision, and they will figure themselves out. You have. We just, not we Norwood, but CSU knocked down Drake. We're going to have to figure out what to do with that. We are on the short list for $1.2 billion investment in the Pikes Peak waterways. And when you think about, that's kind of a really big number to think about. There's already design happening on phase 1 adjacent to the American Beautiful Park. So very, very quickly, even though we can kind of look in the rearview mirror and say yeah, we've been really great, great communities continue to invest in themselves, and that especially means downtown. And so you will hear from me keep looking forward, keep thinking, keep planning, keep dreaming.
I love that. So I feel like this kind of maybe piggybacks on that just a little bit, but if we're talking about urban planning and zoning, and I'm not exactly sure which knowledge we have on the panel in this regard, but what of the future planning and zoning trends might be impacted that are also relating to downtown and the commercial real estate markets?
Well, I can start that one, but so downtown actually years ago, it's probably been at least 10 or 12 years, the whole downtown area went to form-based zoning, and the whole idea was to give city planning more flexibility into what they could allow in certain buildings or certain zones. So basically let the demand of what people want to do in those buildings, so you could have, and we don't have a ton of that in Colorado Springs, but in Denver, for example, when you have these old warehouses, so if you think of the warehouse restaurant, if you zone that industrial and you say this has to remain M1 zone, which is defunct now, but, you can't have a restaurant there. Well, that would be a shame. So that was kind of the whole idea. So all of downtown got overlay with that FBZ, the form-based zone code, to try and facilitate that kind of stuff. And then the county as a whole, just last year, adopted a brand new zoning code as well. So all of us in the business had to relearn all the PBC, M1, C6, that's all dead. But same thing, to try and give them more flexibility into what they allow to go where. And I think, over the past few years, that's just me personally talking, but we've downzoned way too much land in the Colorado Springs into multifamily, for example. And all that low-hanging fruit has been picked. But if you look in the Briargate, for example, if I have a client that says, hey, I want to do a body shop up in Briargate because I think there's a need up there. Well, guess what? I can't find any body shops into Briargate because there's nothing zoned up there for industrial, because all that land that was probably originally planned for that, probably before I came to town, got downzoned into either office or multifamily or single family. So I think hopefully as the city is growing, we kind of need to figure that out, because all the growth is going north and east, and some of that industrial land even, plenty of retail if you go up and down Powers, that's not a problem. Office space up there, the Briargate Business Campus is pretty full, and all those people living up there are going to have to work someplace. So there's going to be some growing pains, just like all these housing units downtown. Like Jeff said, there seems to be these leaps every 20 years or something like that, where the new product is expensive, but all of a sudden, the jump gets made, and then it becomes par for the course. And it's going to be the same thing with these apartments that everybody thinks are crazy expensive, and all these greedy developers are charging all this rent for a one-bedroom. That's insane. And then 10 years later, it's just par for the course. And maybe we'll have a little bit of a softening too in the market as all these units are hitting the market, and there's kind of really, I'm not aware of any large residential multifamily projects kind of being started right now. All this stuff that's coming to market is stuff that got started 4 or 5 years ago. So when all that hits the market, there's going to be a little bit of a glut, as all those landlords are, fishing in the same pond for these tenants that can afford $2,000 for a one bedroom. But it'll get figured out, and we'll step our way up, and it'll keep going. So that's growth.
I'll just add quickly. I feel very fortunate that really in that last recession, when things were slow, was a great time to work on creating the form-based zone, right? Let's put the tool in place so that we're ready when things start taking off again. And so that's been really, really valuable for downtown. It eases the developer's process, and it creates, the kind of environment that it's designed to create, that is more walkable and more inviting. And it is very interesting now. You see cities across the country, and even the state of Colorado, they just enacted some legislation around parking minimums and parking maximums to try to address how we have over-parked so many places throughout a city, not just a downtown, by requiring, there's this strange science around parking that was never really real, right? That said, oh, you're a bowling alley and you have so many lanes, and let's say there's 4 people and they each take their own car, and you're full all the time, so you need this much parking space. That never really proved to be true. So we're seeing cities as well as even statewide, and I do have challenges when things are mandated statewide to tell each community what to do, but we were ahead of the game, at least, in getting form-based zone in. So that gives us one step up right now in trying to tackle some of these things.
Nice, thank you. We had a couple of questions. I know this is something that we talked about briefly on our discussion as well, but we have a couple questions from the audience that are interested in talking about the restaurant closures. So we had 17 restaurants closed down this year in downtown. How do you propose that we address this as a city? And what do you see as the contribution or not contribution of commercial real estate to this problem that we're having?
I would add, the restaurant industry is challenged all over right now, so those numbers are not unique to downtown. We are seeing restaurants fold, again, some of this post-pandemic as leases come up. So it is not a unique downtown situation. That sort of implies that restaurants are doing great all over the city except downtown. What I'll also say is time on market is still pretty small. One place closes and there's still someone with a dream to open another place. So even as some places shut down, and that may be sad, we are still seeing demand for the folks who want to come in next and kind of fulfill their visions. So I don't mean to be cavalier. Here's the other thing. We have a huge proportion of really independently owned restaurants. It's one of the things we brag about. That is always going to be different from a chain, right? When a chain decides to continue on in business, the manager may leave and they hire another manager, whatever the case may be. When you're independently owned and maybe you've run that place 10, 15, 20 years and you've decided it was a great run and now maybe you want to retire or you want to do something else, right? So you're always going to see independent places maybe have more of those changes because it's not necessarily going to go to the next generation and stay in the family or whatever the case may be. So anywhere you have a concentration of independently owned restaurants, those type of situations may happen more often than chains. But of course, post-pandemic, a ton of chains went out of business too. I mean, even downtown, we had a Subway sandwich shop downtown. It closed, and what went in instead was an independently owned place, which of course we love to see. But I would just say it's a tough time for the restaurant industry, period. The numbers, the math, just doesn't make sense anymore. The margins are smaller than ever. Cost of labor, cost of supplies, food, the math just doesn't math the way it used to be. And every restaurant is trying to figure out what works for them, right? And that's where you see changes in hours, changes in how they staff to just try to make it work.
I think as we continue to grow, that's part of this conversation as well, as downtown continues to grow and bring more people in, that can support certainly more opportunities in that way. I think I have time for maybe a closing question for each of you to address. Maybe we'll make it through. Let's see. If you could change one thing about downtown, what would it be?
I won't go first.
Props to whoever sent that one in. You really stumped them. I like it.
That's a curveball. Text me if you have questions, or if you can answer it. I'll answer the question.
Come on, I didn't want to.
Well,
Actually, go.
Susan's going to kill
I thought
me
I
here.
picked an easy one that you guys could just go off of. I was trying to pick something that you could all elaborate on differently, and here we are.
Probably the one thing I would change, and I have some clients that have some real estate that they are trying to either get leased or sell, and unfortunately the homeless situation that they're dealing with around their properties, even though they're at Nevada and I-25, which is like one of the busiest intersections in town, and you would think having real estate there would be killing it. And because of what's going on around it, and it's a huge stigma for anybody else looking at the property, and therefore they get penalized, and it's hard to move. So I mean, the one thing I would change is hopefully figure out how to deal with that segment of the population, which every growing city, I mean, you go into any major metropolitan area throughout the country, and they have this problem, and nobody seems to have been able to figure it out. It's probably just not a silver bullet type of approach, but I think a lot of people avoid downtown because of what comes with it. And especially if they didn't grow up in a big city, they're not used to it, and it turns them off, turns business owners off. So I'm sorry to bring that topic up.
Right at end on that.
Yeah, but
Do you want me to go or you want to go?
Go for it.
So I'm actually going to say two because one's very practical and the others I definitely cannot do. The first is I would change the block sizes. So we have 400 by 400 blocks, which are
Really easy.
very, very large. And then, so that enhances walkability when you go to a smaller block size. Second one is I would put mountains on the east side of downtown.
I don't know which one of those is easier. That's yeah. Oh, wow.
In addition to just sandwich right in the middle? Or are you going to pick them up and
Yes.
move them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can top that one, but I would. I'll just throw out something else entirely different, and that just goes to like our infrastructure and our built environment, right? Safer, better connectivity for people. Ways to get it. I get that we're a car city. I'm not trying to eliminate cars, but we've got to make it safe, convenient, pleasant to walk, to ride your bike, to take alternative transportation, because these thousands more people living in downtown, they're not going to get in their single passenger vehicle to drive 1 mile to their place of employment or that great restaurant. And we need to, at a more rapid pace, improve our connectivity, our tree canopy, right? All those kinds of things that would make the built environment around our commercial businesses and our residents a really safe, pleasant experience.
All right, so I'm going to pivot off of this one, and I'm going to say, what's your favorite thing about our downtown space? Instead of stumping you with moving mountains. Jeff, you have to start with this one. You have to start, Mr. Positivity. What is your favorite thing about our downtown?
My favorite, and personally, my favorite part of downtown is the amount of choice you have. There really isn't a place in our community where you can go physically to a city council meeting if you're actually into that. Sorry, Michelle, if you're out there.
I think she is.
You can go have a very craft cocktail somewhere. You can go play in a playground, and there's so many. It's a very high concentration of diversity in not just people ways, but in activity ways.
I'd say something similar to just independent shops and restaurants. Like I said, we want to be uniquely us. And I love, especially like Small Business Saturday, I can go out and you see people whose relatives are visiting for the holidays, and every time they're like, they want to go to Terra Verde or go wherever. Or new places like Kronk, which is this massive retail that's all about, I say dead things, but it's their time of year because Halloween's coming up. But there's like giant terrarium full of tarantulas and stuff, and kids love it, and it's cool, and it's fun, and it's different. And when I just met with incoming CC freshmen, and I said, have you been downtown yet? What do you like? And it was like the ice cream shop and this place called Kronk that's just full of unique items you would never find anywhere else. So I want to make sure we have that, unique character.
yeah, I'd say the eclecticness. Whatever you're into, you can find, and I think it's only going to get better. The more, it's chicken and egg kind of a thing. So the more residents we have downtown, the more people go downtown, the more those retailers can afford to offer different things. And so whatever you're into, I grew up in Montreal, you walk up and down St. Catherine Street, there's everything you could potentially want, maybe some things you shouldn't have there anyways, but zoning will keep that from happening, so we're all good. But it'll just keep getting better, and it's keeping that, keep Colorado Springs weird, sort of, I guess.
No, we're not that weird.
We're not weird, not like Austin.
No. All right, I'd like to, sorry? Eyes on the street.
Yes. I love our public art as well. Thank you. Jim Harris of U.S. Bank, our founding sponsor of Art on the Streets.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of our discussion today. I would like us all to thank our panelists for participating. Our next session is going to be back in the main theater where we started, so you have a little bit of a break, and then you can find your way back over there and listen to our closing presentation of the day. Thank you all for being here.